Just a few days into this summer's big roundup near Ely, Nevada, the helicopter conked out. And as the cowboys waited for spare parts to arrive, they had time to practice roping techniques on each other.
This one's got plenty.
And to perform assorted maintenance chores. The Wranglers work for KG Livestock, one of the two principal contractors who handled the dirty work for BLM. The companies have been paid millions of dollars for rounding up Mustangs. Contrary to what we'd been promised, camera-shy KG owner Karen Cook wouldn't talk to us, nor would her cowboys, nor would the BLM's wild horse specialist. If they had, we would have asked them why they brought along a collection of electronic cattle prods to a horse roundup, and about the damage they caused to the range every time they chopped down trees and crushed sagebrush while setting up their traps, or about the harsh tactics they used during an earlier burro roundup near Las Vegas. The horses gathered on day one of this roundup are, according to BLM, dangerously thin. That was also the opinion about a band we photographed as it was captured in an adjacent range. To our untrained eyes, they looked magnificent, keeping in mind that Mustangs are wild animals and are not supposed to look like pampered barnyard pets. In Nevada, you don't often see fat deer or elk or Mustangs. If the range is unfit for horses, if it's too dry and sparse, why are they here? And why are they thriving to such a degree that BLM is constantly rounding them up in greater numbers? We asked Alan Shepard, BLM's new wild horse director for Nevada.
Why are the horses there if they can't survive there? If they couldn't survive there, would they either be dead or gone?
There's enough to keep them going. There really is. It's just the way I look at it is I want healthy horses. I don't want a horse that's stressed all the time trying to eke out a living.
Mustang advocates would argue that the battle to survive is what every wild animal faces every day. BLM's new standard that wild horses should lead stress-free lives or be rounded up is yet another example of overly broad discretion that can be used by the Bureau at any time to justify eliminating the herds. It's a judgment call to say these horses are too thin or this range is too stressed, and BLM's judgment is not always on the up and up. Chris Hennefield told us one reason the Ely horses had to be removed is because it's stressful for them to travel 10 miles or more per day between their water and their food. Yet in BLM roundups, the horses are often driven 10 or more miles. BLM memos say such distances aren't hard on the horses at all. There are many examples of BLM stacking the deck through the selective use of facts and images. In its plan for the Ely gathers, BLM released a few select photos to suggest the range itself is in terrible shape because of the Mustangs.
Degrades the
Independent ecologist Craig Downer spent a week traversing the same range and found zero evidence of damage caused by horses. We did likewise. This hill in the White River Valley is one of the boundaries used for the Ely gather. On one side of it is a huge reservoir fed by springs, so wet it produces oceans of cattails in the desert. But like other water sources in the area, it's off limits to horses. And on the other side of the hill is more water and more greenery, grassy fields in front of a ranch. The ranch relies on leased public range as well, but all this is for cattle. It's a herd management area for horses, but now it's been cleared of horses because BLM thinks they can't survive here. Ranchers and the BLM often create hardships for horses by fencing off water sources or ranges. In 2004, BLM spent millions of dollars on an emergency roundup of horses in Nevada. Emotional photos were released of horses that died for lack of water, but horse groups took their own photos from a different angle. The dead horses were denied water because of fences, and on the other side of the fences, healthy cattle. BLM has, in years past, conducted emergency roundups when horses were clearly in trouble, dying of thirst or hunger, or when the range has been wiped out by wildfire. More recently, the term emergency has lost all meaning. It is invoked by BLM as a convenient way to sidestep the public and speed up the gather process.
There's no doubt they've abused the emergency gather provisions that are available to them and overextended that provision in areas where they wanted to remove horses.
The horse gathers now underway represent a major departure in BLM policy. zeroing out herd areas not because the Mustangs are in trouble, but because the Mustangs might be in trouble someday down the road.
It's better to gather the horses now while they're healthy. I know it's a challenging decision. It's a tough decision to make.
To put it mildly.
What's really driving that is the desperate need to take numbers of horses off the rolls and off the range. So it has little to do with current range conditions and a whole lot more to do with we just want to get them out of here.
South of Caliente, the picturesque canyons that are next to be zeroed out, range scientist Craig Downer and colleague Dr. Don Moldy saw ample water and healthy range, but few horses. What they did see were plenty of cattle, doing what cattle do, hunkering down in the same spot until they're forced to move, unlike horses, which are always on the move. Critics say the BLM is all too eager to blame horses for whatever range problems they find. A few thousand horses on public lands are a problem, but a few million cattle are not. Don Moldy recalls a range inspection with the BLM and a rancher where a water hole had been demolished.
The thing was trashed, it was muddy, it was messy, there were cow prints everywhere, cow poop everywhere. I looked around, couldn't see any horse poop. Went up to the BLM guy and the Department of Wildlife biologist and the daughter of the guy that had the allotment, and said, you know, it looks like cows really made a mess out of this place. And they said, oh, no, horses did this. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. If horses did all of this, where is the horse poop? And they looked on the ground and there was none.
According to the Nevada BLM, the amount of livestock grazing on public land has plunged in recent years, even more than the horses. It's unclear how much of that is caused by economic conditions or competition from feedlot operators, but it doesn't appear to be the result of BLM ordering cows off the range.
A lot of folks accuse us of catering to the livestock industry. The permittees that we have, the livestock permittees that we have over here in this area, they voluntarily reduced their numbers already.
Maybe so, but this preliminary report for BLM's Ely Roundup spells it out. Eliminating the Mustangs reduces the competition for livestock and other wildlife.
I know they're fudging the numbers, okay, just because of what the numbers are saying. You know, math is math.
Mustang defender Cindy McDonald has by necessity become a freedom of information expert over the past few years, using the law to squeeze bits of information out of BLM. She says the Bureau is constantly changing its mind about the number of horses on the range.
It appears to me from their numbers that last year they had taken off between 11 and 14,000 more horses than was necessary.
McDonald alleges that BLM has repeatedly lied to the public about the program, including the so-called emergency gathers.
Almost in all instances, the emergencies are fabricated.
She says the haughtiest and least reliable BLM honcho she's encountered is Nevada's Susie Stokey.
I think that she exemplifies the attitude among most BLM people in that they know best. We don't know what we're talking about.
We're doing everything we can.
And that the reason Susie has continued to climb the ranks is that she's good at it. I just can't believe that somebody in that kind of position can do such blatant lying.
And this last 3 days, without question, has been the highlight of my career.
When we interviewed Stokey in late 2007, she told us she was on cloud 9.
I'm still in the hot air balloon.
Her bubbly spirit seemed way out of whack in light of the events leading up to our interview. We drove to northern Nevada to ask Stokey about the deaths of 70 wild horses on the Tonopah Range, apparently of nitrate poisoning. And while we were on the road to see her, 129 wild horses died horrible deaths at Palomino Valley, a facility that Stokey oversaw in her job as Nevada Wild Horse Director. More than 200 of the wild horses in her jurisdiction had died, but Stokey had sunshine in her heart.
It was awesome.
She was giddy because of the success of a horse adoption event sponsored by the Nevada office but held in Texas. Stokey is notorious among Nevada horse advocates for interfering with efforts to find adoptive homes for horses here. She declared on her own that Nevada should supply other states with horses rather than spend money itself on adoptions. From 2003 through 2006, Nevada BLM spent $2 million a year on roundups, just under half its budget, but it spent a mere $122,000 per year on adoptions. No wonder there's always a backlog of horses. Stokey presented us with numbers that were slanted to make the adoption spending look higher at $200,000 a year, still a pittance.
Did you spend $200,000 in any of those 3 years on adoptions?
I think what's important is the average.
Did you spend $200,000 on adoptions in any of those years, other than this one, since we filed the FOIA request?
I believe so.
Could we get those numbers from you?
They're right here.
The numbers were inflated in what looked to us like an attempt to mislead. After we reported this subterfuge, Sunshine Susie got a promotion. It's no wonder there's such a lack of trust among wild horse groups.
Nevada, with over 50% of the horses, as much as any state that has wild horses, is viewed as an anti-wild horse management operation where the BLM is concerned.
Still to come, is this the final solution?